That night is still fresh in my mind. I was watching TV when I heard my sister's loud voice echoing across the calm room. "Where are you, Luke?" Her voice seemed urgent, like there was an emergency and I needed help. I hurried to my feet and asked, "What's wrong?" With a hint of bewilderment that I had forgotten my garments, her voice reverberated from the restroom. "Would you be able to fetch them for me from my room?" Despite her gentleness and beauty, my sister was incredibly forgetful. She had previously requested me to fetch her something, but this time it was different. I went upstairs to my room, found the clothing she had left, and carried them downstairs to the restroom. She opened the door somewhat wider than normal when I knocked, and she swiftly reached out to grab the garments. But for a split second, the light from the restroom shone off her pale skin, showing me every line of her body that I never would have imagined seeing. I turned away in confusion, but my eyes couldn't get rid of that sight. My pulse was still racing. I started to notice a shift in my heart after that day. She remained the closest person in the house and my sister. However, I couldn't shake the weird, eerie feeling from that time, which led me to a series of incorrect ideas. I didn't know how to confront myself or her. This year, my sister Nora turns 24. She's a very attractive, self-assured woman who always draws attention to herself. She has a delicate face, a trim body, and, most importantly, a noticeable, alluring waist that is hard to miss. She has a liberal nature and frequently wears tight clothing both indoors and out. Whether on purpose or accidentally, such ensembles seem to bring out her entire attractiveness. And every time I see them, my heart races. Everything in my heart has changed since the night I glimpsed her through the partially open bathroom door. I will never forget it because of the shimmering water flowing down her body's curves and the soft yellow light shining off her white skin. Like a ghost, that sensation and that preoccupation never go away, even though I know that moment shouldn't have happened and shouldn't have persisted in my thoughts for so long. I initially made an effort to convince myself that the vision was merely a regrettable coincidence and that everything would be fine. However, as I lay in bed each night, the events of that day continued to play out in my mind, vivid in every way. In an attempt to push the incorrect notions out of my head, I would occasionally wake up in the middle of the night with cold perspiration streaming down my brow. However, the more I made an effort to suppress them, the more strongly those feelings erupted, destroying my logic like a fire. She continued to live happily in our tiny home every day, utterly oblivious to the turmoil that was taking place inside of me. She called me in her clear, familiar voice, which I used to think was the most regular thing, and joked and laughed with me as usual. However, my heart was now flooded with weird feelings just by seeing her, gazing into her glittering eyes, or perhaps inhaling the soft scent of her perfume. I only knew that I was not myself, and I was unable to articulate why. It was made considerably more difficult by her tight clothing. Every small detail, like her long legs crossed while watching TV or her hair done up to show off, her exposed shoulders and long neck left me feeling torn between conflicting emotions. I experienced embarrassment, shame, and an elusive desire that I was unable to ignore. I nevertheless made an effort to look as composed as I could. As like nothing had happened, I conversed with her and we laughed. I talked to her about unimportant topics, helped her with little household chores, and occasionally even made fun of her for smiling. But underneath all of that was an internal conflict that I had no idea would ever be resolved. I was scared she would notice something was wrong with me, so I dared not look into her eyes for too long. I chose to watch an adult film in my room one afternoon after a busy day. I had done this before, but maybe because of my erratic mood and my recent jumbled thoughts, everything looked more alluring than before. I'd lay on the bed for a while after watching, unable to shake the thoughts and pictures that were still in my head. I snapped out of it as Nora knocked on the door. "Come out here with me for a minute, Luke. Get some veggies for supper." Her voice resounded, as soft and urgent as ever. "Yes," I said, and after a brief pause, I hurried to my feet and straightened my attire, completely forgetting that I was not wearing underwear. I saw Nora's picture as soon as I stepped down to the living room. She wore short shorts that exposed her long white legs and a tight t-shirt that accentuated her small waist. My mind went blank for a second after reading each of those flawless phrases. Like a thundering tsunami, the ideas I made an effort to maintain my composure, pushed the feelings that were rushing to the side, and went over to her. However, my body subsequently reacted against my volition for an unknown cause. Even more terrifying was the fact that I totally forgot I was not wearing underpants when I felt my little man getting erect. My entire body seemed to be betraying my intellect, forcing me into an unpleasant and unmanageable predicament. Suddenly, Nora started laughing, and the quiet room echoed with her laughter. Something difficult to describe flooded her eyes as she gazed at me. I couldn't understand what she was laughing about, so I was perplexed. What's the matter? Did I ask a witty question to cover up my confusion? However, she continued to giggle until she had to turn aside to avoid staring at me. "This is not a good way for you to go out, Luke." Trying not to chuckle, she covered her mouth as she spoke. She kept laughing while I stood there in the center of the living room, still not understanding what was happening. "What's wrong?" I asked. Did I say anything amusing? Because she shook her head, attempting to hide her shame. "No, it isn't anything," she said hesitantly in a serious yet covert tone. "Go upstairs. I'll go alone." I just stood there, looking at her bewildered. Why did she instruct me to go alone after first asking me to accompany her? Despite my doubts, I was at a loss for what to ask. My mind was a mess as I came back into the room. My eyes paused as I passed the mirror, and I understood what had made her laugh. My little boy had been waving his flag for a long time, and I had no underwear on. Shame was scorching in my face. I remained motionless, feeling ashamed and unsure of what to do. I could still hear her laughter. Was Nora aware of it? She certainly did, or else she wouldn't have let out such a loud laugh. However, why didn't she say it out loud? What made her timidly tell me to return to the room? My mind began to race with questions, and my heart began to race. Did she have something else in mind, or was she only giggling at this amusing circumstance? I tried to ignore the uncomfortable feeling by lying down on the bed and covering my face with my hands. However, I couldn't get Nora's picture, her laughing, and that hazy misunderstanding out of my head. I questioned whether she felt the same way about me as I did about her. Or was I just fooling myself? And it was all a coincidence. My heart ached from guilt, yet I couldn't help but think about her because of a hazy light of hope that also appeared. I was still feeling ashamed of what had transpired when Nora got home. I thought she might have seen something earlier that made her chuckle, but I wasn't positive. My face began to burn more and more as I considered it, as though I had just been caught in the act of doing something improper. But I reminded myself to maintain my composure and pretend nothing had occurred. In an attempt to restore our normal, organic relationship, I made the decision to go down to the kitchen and make supper with my sister. I said, "You're back," as usual, as soon as I walked in. "Is the market packed with people?" Nora simply said, "It's fine, but it's a bit crowded," without turning around. "Come on in and assist me." After giving her a nod, I moved to the area where she was cleaning the veggies. I took a seat and began breaking up the vegetable branches so she could get them ready for boiling. There was simply the sound of water running from the sink faucet in the room. However, the stress was still simmering within me. I wasn't sure if I was making things more difficult for her or if she actually recognized what had just transpired. I reasoned that everything would be all right if I didn't bring it up again. However, her voice came out at that same time, making me tense. "Are you finished yet?" I was taken aback. Her comment struck my already erratic head like a ton of bricks. I knew what she was hinting at, but I lacked the guts to confront it. My entire body froze, unsure of how to respond. Even though my heart was racing, I made an effort to act as though I didn't get what she was saying. "Oh, I broke it all the way through. Shouldn't it be all right?" Her eyes were unpredictable and naughty. As she turned to face me, she grinned and gave a small nod. "Leave it there, if you're finished." I can go on because even though her voice seemed perfectly regular, I found something odd about what she was saying. It was light-hearted and amusing, yet it made me feel really ashamed. I simply nodded and got to my feet without saying anything else. "Let me go upstairs, then. I'm a little fatigued, but you go on." With a small smile, Nora remained silent. I tried to move normally as I exited the kitchen in silence, but my heart was racing. I felt embarrassed and guilty, so I collapsed on the bed when I returned to my room. I kept wondering if she truly understood what I was thinking as her question replayed again in my mind. I felt bewildered and powerless as I lay on the bed with my hands over my face. I had to restrain myself. My sister is this, my sister is Nora. As a reminder, I said it again. I couldn't get the vision of her in the kitchen, though, with her mocking voice and smile. I went back to my room that evening to tidy up the mess in the corner of my desk after the family had completed eating. Only the chirping of insects outside the window could be heard because it was so silent. I heard a faint knock on the door while I was occupied putting my books away. "Who is it?" I said in a slightly inquisitive tone. Her voice rang in, gentle and familiar, and it was me, Nora. "Would you mind? I need your help with something." "No problem," I said promptly. As I said that, I went to the door and opened it. "What do you need?" Although Nora was standing in front of me, her pajamas were what initially drew my attention. Her pure white skin looked lovely in a bright blue silk nightgown. The dress's somewhat deep V-neck showed off her slim shoulders and a small portion of her collarbone. My heart skipped a beat, but I made an effort to maintain a normal expression. Grinning, she carried her phone into the room. "My phone isn't working properly. I have no idea why, but the program crashes every time I open it. I attempted to restart it, but it was unsuccessful. Are you able to assist me?" I took the phone from her and nodded. "I'll try. Most likely, it's just a software problem. Perhaps an operating system upgrade or an app conflict." As natural as ever, Nora stood there, but I couldn't understand why she was in this tiny space, especially in her pajamas. Glancing down at my phone, I began to go through the settings. Her operating system was too outdated and incompatible with the latest version of the application, as I had anticipated. I clarified that you need to update the operating system on your phone. It will work if I download and reinstall the latest update. "Oh, really? Thank heavens. I was afraid it was broken," she stated in a calm, gentle manner. I could feel her eyes on me as I stooped to download the update. I instinctively cast a sidelong peek at her. Instead of focusing on the phone or my activities, she was staring down at me. Abruptly, she flashed a smile that I couldn't read and didn't understand. I hesitated, attempting to hide my shame. But on the inside, I was far more confused. I was aware of that expression and what she had just witnessed, but I was afraid to speak or face it. I stumbled, trying to break the uneasy mood, but I managed to reinstall it. That quick? With a little smile on her lips, she said, "Thanks." She returned the phone to me, looking at my face for a moment as though to see how I would respond. "It isn't anything. It's just a little mistake," I said, attempting to seem composed. However, I secretly understood that composure was a front. Her appearance and subtle body language tonight had caused an uncontrollable emotional outburst in me. I thought everything was ended when I gave Nora the phone and got ready to get up to see her leave the room. Before I could respond, though, she abruptly turned around, leaned on the table's edge, and inquired in a quiet but profound voice, "Do I look beautiful, Luke?" I hesitated, uncertain of how to respond to the unexpected question. In an attempt to divert attention, I grinned awkwardly. "Isn't it lovely? However, why are you asking that now? Is there a problem?" With her eyes still fixed on me, as though attempting to read my response, Nora grinned. Then, tilting her head, she said, "Did you just see me? That's why you," in a light-hearted but slightly serious tone, saluted. Her remarks resembled a lightning strike. My entire body was bewildered and unsure of what to do as the blood rushed to my face and my heart began to race. I instantly disputed it and shook my head, saying, "No, it's not like that." "What are you contemplating?" However, her eyes remained fixed on me, and her faint grin only served to increase my embarrassment. She approached me gradually, giving me the impression that this tiny space was getting smaller. I took a step back, attempting to maintain my distance. Then she sprang forward, her face just a few centimeters from mine, both hands gripping my shoulders. "What are you terrified of, Luke? I understand what you're thinking since I've witnessed it all, and we're both adults." I didn't dare look at her, so I turned away. "What are you talking about, Nora? It's not humorous, so stop making jokes." However, she continued to approach, getting closer and closer. I was more anxious than before since I could feel her warm breath on my neck. "Why do you ignore me, Luke?" Although Nora's voice was gentle, her words were like a razor piercing my brain. "I know you want me to." My heart felt like it was going to burst from my chest as the air seemed to get thicker. "Don't say it," I replied, my voice shaking, but powerful enough to halt the escalating threat. I took a step back, putting some space between us, and I stared at her tensely. "Are you speaking correctly?" "Nora, this is incorrect. My sister is you." There was a brief flicker of pain in her eyes. She stepped forward and spoke in a low, almost beseeching manner. "Don't tell yourself lies, Luke. Your eyes tell me everything. You're not required to feign or conceal your emotions." Even though my entire body froze, my intellect managed to fight against it. I inhaled deeply while attempting to maintain my composure. "No, you're mistaken, in spite of my anxiety and bewilderment. I don't want it, and I don't think that way. We are family, brothers." She paused, humiliation and disappointment on her face. She looked into my eyes, looking for a signal to go on. I refused to let her go any farther, though, so I kept my eyes fixed on her. At last, she averted her gaze, as though she was afraid to confront reality. Her voice trailed off to a regretful whisper. "I apologize. I have no idea why I am this way. Perhaps I better return to my room." Then she turned and left. The oppressive mood that persisted in the room seemed to be dragged with every heavy step. I felt as though I had just survived a major storm as I sat down on the bed, When the door closed, I had no way out of the turmoil that was my thinking. I could still hear Nora's remarks. Every phrase and every statement seemed to reach my deepest recesses. I didn't have to pretend, she replied. I wanted her to. The feelings I had attempted to conceal, feelings that even I didn't want to acknowledge, seemed to be revealed by those words. She was correct. After those ostensibly inadvertent times, I couldn't deny that I had thought incorrectly about her. However, my rationality was sufficient to remind me that she was my sister, regardless of how intense my feelings were, and there was a line we could never cross. I recognized the risk of this circumstance. The thin line between us has been shattered by every word and deed of hers tonight. Everything would fall apart irreparably if I failed to maintain my composure and let myself go even once.